Hey everyone, my name is Bennett. I will be going over the operating systems and firewalls that were assigned. The operating systems were the Microsoft Server 2019 or Windows Server 2019, as well as Ubuntu Server 20 LTS, and the firewalls of Windows Firewall and IP tables for Linux distros or operating systems. So the first one I'll be going over is the Microsoft Server 2019. So more or less, this server is built more for enterprise environments versus the OS that we're all familiar with that's used for more personal uses. So this server, or this OS, will possess the configurability and the capabilities to host built-in server roles. So the roles will include DHCP to store and assign IP addresses when a new device is brought onto the network, as well as it can host Active Directory for for an organization to better manage permissions and user roles and access. So as you can see, for everyday users who use maybe their computer for Facebook and email, they won't need Active Directory. So Microsoft Server 2019 won't be geared towards them. So it's also built with improvements to enhance the communication with Microsoft's cloud environment, Azure. So it's more or less going to further your capability for hybrid environments, which we're seeing more and more in the enterprise environment. So some of these improvements include Azure Backup, file sync, disaster recovery, and a few more features. So there's also an improved server management, which will allow communication from basically one single pane of glass or one location, which will be Windows Admin Center. And you can use this to both your cloud or communicate with both your cloud and local servers. And it can be used in place of your typical server manager you'll see when you set up servers, as well as some other older tools. So a couple hardening recommendations that I found. User configuration is one. So basically, you can disable local admin account on the server, and it's recommended to create a unique admin account within AD to carry out any admin required tools, required tasks. So the unique admin account, it should have a unique name and not contain admin or administrator. Uh, Typically, attackers who are in the system will look for those admin accounts or administrators, and obviously, if it's named that, it'll be a dead giveaway. Um, so so just make sure that is different. We also want to ensure that there's a strong password policy in place and it's being implemented, and possibly a password vault or security vault that's being used to store these unique passwords. That way, if someone within the organization does need to access an account, they will have a secure place where they can find that password. So we also want to double check groups within your server to ensure that the permissions are correct. So all the users are within the correct AD group, and no one has permission who shouldn't. So another one is we want to configure roles and features accordingly. So it's important to ensure the server has only the necessary features and roles enabled to allow it to function as intended and without leaving holes within your environment. So it may be wise to consult with a representative of the product that is being implemented on the server you're working on, just to ensure only the necessary features are enabled. And the last one is the RDP configuration. So more or less just ensure RDP is backed up by some form of MFA and or some type of access restriction to the server unless it's connected to a VPN, which should in theory also require MFA. So any other remote connection protocols should be disabled within your server, such as Telnet and FTP. So next we're going to go over the Windows firewall. So as in the name, Windows Firewall is a firewall, and it's an application installed on the endpoint, and it'll provide network security to that specific device that it's installed on. So it'll protect the device more or less by controlling, deciphering incoming and outgoing traffic, and it's essentially a barrier between the device and the internet that can protect against malicious access and software, as well as manually restricting access to any sites that are defined by the firewall manager. So a few features that I found was there's network isolation, traffic segregation, and IP security seem to be the main ones. So the network isolation will prevent websites from performing any malicious activity geared towards your browsing experience, while traffic segregation will protect the endpoints from becoming associated with a botnet and as well as protect against any viruses, while the IP security feature will encrypt your internet traffic. So the firewall does come pre-configured and it's more or less turnkey, so it requires little, if any, modifications to be used um, to be used efficiently by most users. So it does have a GUI interface as well as um, sorry, it does have a GUI interface within the OS, so it's easy to configure the firewall based on any specific needs that you may have. So a couple hardening features that I found is to prevent PowerShell internet access. I thought this was interesting. So PowerShell is a powerful tool within Windows environment. If you aren't familiar with it, it is very powerful. So it more or less can be used both to your advantage and disadvantage. So disabling PowerShell's internet access provides protection to any attacks that could utilize PowerShell to infiltrate your system. So another one is audit firewall rules. This is always a rule of thumb within firewalls. So the rules can become easily disorganized, and maintaining a clear and efficient rule base, it takes a lot of work. So Windows, fortunately, again, is turnkey and does come with recommended pre-configured firewall rules that are generally best for most systems. But even if you don't configure rules on your own, it is still recommended to regularly review those rules as they may become inactive or misconfigured due to various reasons. And then the last one that I had was Windows um, does release security baselines with each update to the OS. So reviewing these firewall baselines and cross-referencing them to your Windows firewall rules is a great way to keep your system at its most secure state. So next is another OS, Ubuntu Server 20 LTS. Um, so So Ubuntu Server 20 LTS is a free open source Linux-based product for enterprise environments again. So LTS actually stands for long time support, and supposedly it will be under support until 2025. So a new feature that I found that I thought was interesting is the live installer. So this version will offer what they call, again, the live installer, which will basically provide the ability to allow the system to update if there are available updates at the time of reboot. So if you reboot the system, the user will be prompted whether to update the system, and you'll have the option to accept or decline. So it'll provide a more efficient and user-friendly way to update the OS. So another feature, a new feature that I found was, and I thought was interesting. So SSH authentication was actually previously only single sign-on authentication. So now they have actually enforced MFA for any type of SSH connection. So um, it'll be utilized through either a physical device or authentication app when signing on and using the MFA. And so more or less the security posture obviously significantly improves. So requiring the feature additional authentication step will prevent malicious access if credentials for the server had been compromised. Um, so a couple hardening recommendations that I found, patching, updating the existing software. So patching any additional exploits by updating software currently installed on the OS is obviously always a great first step to harden Ubuntu. Also disabling root user and creating a new anonymous admin or root account for the admin tasks. And again, attackers will look for that root or admin account and can exploit the accounts easily and gain admin access, which is never good. So not having this information ready available will prevent the admin access being gained by any malicious party. And then lastly, configuring the account lockout policy. So you can actually change the port SSH from 22, which is the common port for SSH, to another more unique port number within the firewall. So it'll prevent the appearance that SSH is actually active if common ports are being scanned by another party, and you can actually configure max auth tries to lock out any IP address who attempts connection based on the amount of failed login attempts within a certain period of time. And then lastly, we have the Linux firewall IP tables. It's considered a command line firewall that uses policy chains to accept or deny traffic. And IP tables will maintain, review, configure the packet filter or firewall rules in Linux. And it utilizes a table that's associated with these rules, which are or consist of the chains or list of rules. So each of the rules within the chains specifies how to handle the packets, any packets that match, and these are called actual targets. So some of the type of the chains I found was input, forward, output. So the input chain will handle the incoming traffic, and it'll match the attempt to a rule within your input chain based on the IP address and port. The forward chain is actually used to forward traffic and isn't intended for your device. It's actually intended for another host, and your IP tables will forward that traffic over to that other host. And then the output chain is for outgoing traffic, and it'll reference the output chain rules, and based on the connection type and where you'll be connecting, you'll either be allowed or denied. So a few hardening recommendations I found was make sure that only the necessary ports are enabled, turned on within your table. That way, no ports are being used that shouldn't be. So also make sure you review your packet filtering by the source. So IP tables, it can be configured to review packets based on their source IP address. And based on that, it can either allowed or deny or drop based on the source. And we also want to make sure that that drop feature is turned on. So if there is a IP source that shouldn't be connecting, it will actually drop that connection as well, just to ensure that there isn't any unwanted access. So that's all I have for this assignment. Here's my reference page. Feel free to look through those. And I look forward to what everyone else found on these subjects, and I look forward to what you have to say about what I found.